You've given us a fascinating challenge to really dig into competitive strategy using some key resources you've found. So let's get straight to it.
Sounds good.
Today, we're zeroing in on a true classic, Michael Porter's Five Competitive Forces That Shape Strategy. This article, originally published way back in 1979, is still incredibly relevant, isn't it, for understanding why some industries are just more profitable than others?
Absolutely. And I think what makes Porter's work so powerful and, well, so useful for you, the listener, is that it gives you a framework, a way to look beyond just your direct competitors,
Right.
and understand the real fundamental drivers of industry profitability. It helps you pinpoint where the pressure points are and maybe where the opportunities lie.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole playing field. So Porter lays out five forces. First, there's the rivalry among the existing players. The company's already sort of slugging it out. Second, the threat of new entrants, those looking to jump into the game.
Mhm.
Then we have the bargaining power of suppliers who can squeeze your costs.
Yeah.
Next, the bargaining power of buyers, your customers, who can push for lower prices. And finally, the threat of substitute products or services, different ways your customers can get their needs met.
Right.
Our mission today is to really unpack these five forces so you can quickly grasp how they impact, well, any industry you're analyzing.
And the key insight right off the bat, I think, is that profitability isn't just about who your current competitors are. It's really about the intensity of each of these five forces, driven by the underlying economics and the structure of the industry itself.
Okay, let's dive into that first force then, rivalry among existing competitors. Now, you might immediately think, oh, that's just how many competitors there are. But Porter says it's more about how intense that competition is and, crucially, how they're competing. Is it all about price or...
That's the crucial nuance, yeah. Price is often a big part of it, sure. But what really cranks up the intensity? Several things. If you have lots of players, especially if they're all roughly the same size and power, well, they're going to be constantly vying for the same customers.
Makes
Another factor is slow industry growth. I mean, if the overall pie isn't getting much bigger, the only way for a company to grow is to steal market share from someone else.
Which means getting aggressive.
Exactly. More
Yeah.
aggressive competition. Also, consider high exit barriers. If it's really difficult or expensive for companies to just leave the industry, you can end up with struggling players sticking around, competing hard, even if it hurts everyone's profitability.
So they're stuck.
Kind of, yeah. And if the companies are very committed, maybe for strategic reasons beyond just profit, that fuels rivalry too. And finally, if companies aren't great at reading each other's signals, you get miscalculations, knee-jerk reactions, more intense rivalry.
So when that competition boils down to just price, it sounds like a race to the bottom. Why is that so damaging?
It is, basically.
Yeah.
When companies only compete on price, they're essentially just handing over their profits to the customer. It becomes this cycle, right? Everyone keeps lowering prices to win deals.
Mm.
And because price cuts are so easy for competitors to see and match, it often just triggers a chain reaction of retaliation. Plus, think about what it teaches your customers.
Yeah.
It trains them to only care about the lowest price, to not value things like features or service or brand.
Right, it cheapens the whole offering in their minds. Porter points out some specific conditions that make this price competition more likely. What should we be looking for there?
Well, you'll typically see more intense price competition when the products or services are pretty much the same, like commodities, and when there aren't really any costs for buyers to switch between suppliers.
Easy come, easy go.
Exactly. Also, industries with high fixed costs, think factories, airlines, but low marginal costs, the cost of producing just one more unit. They often fall into price wars. Huge pressure to keep capacity full, even if it means slashing prices.
Okay.
Large, infrequent expansions in capacity can also throw off the supply-demand balance, leading to oversupply and price cuts. And finally, if the product is perishable like produce or fast fashion or even just empty airline seats.
Right, unused capacity.
Unused capacity. There's a huge incentive to cut prices to sell it before it loses all its value. The key insight here is when these conditions are strong, price becomes the main weapon and profits suffer for everyone.
Okay, so price wars. Generally bad news for the bottom line, but what about competing on other things, like better features or maybe superior customer service?
Competing on those non-price factors is usually less destructive. It actually gives you a chance to build more value for the customer, which can support higher prices.
Right.
If you're focusing on innovation or features or service, you might be able to differentiate yourself from substitutes, or even make it harder for new companies to enter because they'd have to match you on those dimensions too. It can actually expand the pie, by attracting customers willing to pay more for a better overall experience.
And Porter talks about positive sum rivalry. That sounds good, like a win-win. How can competitors actually increase overall industry profitability?
Yeah, it happens when competitors aren't all chasing the exact same customers with the exact same thing. Instead, they might focus on serving different segments of the market.
Different niches.
Exactly. Different niches, tailored products, competing on different things that appeal to different needs, like the auto industry. You've
Yeah.
got luxury brands, economy brands, trucks, SUVs.
Yeah.
They cater to diverse preferences.
So they avoid direct head-to-head price wars across the board.
Right. And they potentially expand the overall market.
Huh.
The core idea is by focusing on different value propositions, competitors can coexist more profitably.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's move on to the second force, the threat of new entrants. These are the companies not currently in the industry, but, maybe thinking about jumping in. Why should the existing companies worry about them?
Well, new entrants bring fresh capacity, for one. They bring a hunger to gain market share, and often they bring innovative new approaches. This puts pressure on existing companies. Pressure to lower prices, maybe increase their own costs through more marketing or R&D, and just invest more to stay competitive. And, and think about companies diversifying from other markets.
Yeah.
They can sometimes leverage existing resources like brands or tech they already have to really shake things up. The key takeaway is that the potential for new entry, just the threat of it, can keep profitability in check.
So how do the companies already there try to fend off these potential newcomers? Porter talks about entry barriers.
Yeah.
What exactly are those?
Entry barriers are basically advantages that the incumbent companies have, things that make it more difficult or more expensive for a new company to come in and compete effectively. Think of them like hurdles.
Okay, hurdles.
And it's crucial to remember it's the threat of entry that limits profit potential.
Mhm.
If the barriers are low and potential entrants don't expect a big fight, the threat is high and profitability will likely be lower. High barriers, on the other hand, protect the existing players, let them enjoy higher profits.
Okay, let's break down these barriers. First up, supply-side economies of scale. What's the basic idea there?
Think about buying in bulk, right? The more you buy, often the cheaper per item. It's similar for companies producing stuff. If you produce at higher volumes, you can often achieve lower costs per unit.
Wow.
While you can spread fixed costs, like a factory, over more products, you might use more efficient large-scale tech, or maybe get better deals from your suppliers because you're buying so much.
Got it.
This acts as a barrier because a newcomer either has to come in big right away, which is super risky,
Yeah.
or accept a cost disadvantage. Porter mentions things like microprocessors think Intel's huge R&D and factory costs, or national lawn care products like Scott's with their supply chain and advertising reach, or package delivery like FedEx or UPS with their massive logistics networks.
So bigger often means cheaper to produce, essentially.
In these cases, yeah, scale gives a cost advantage that's hard for newcomers to match.
Makes sense. What's next? Demand-side benefits of scale. That sounds a bit less straightforward.
It is a bit different. These are often called network effects. It's when a product or service becomes more valuable to every user, the more people use it.
Like social media.
Exactly like social media. The more friends on a platform, the more you want to be there too. Or think about buyer confidence in a big, established company for critical software. You know that old saying, no one ever got fired for buying from IBM?
Ah, great.
That reflects this idea. Online marketplaces like eBay are another example. More buyers attract more sellers, which attracts more buyers.
A virtuous cycle.
For the incumbent, yes, it's a barrier because a new entrant starts with few or no users, so they just can't offer the same value initially. Sometimes value increases with size, making it tough for small newcomers.
Right, that snowball effect. Okay, next. Customer switching costs. What kind of costs are we talking about when a customer decides to change suppliers?
These are the fixed costs a buyer faces when they switch. It could be needing new equipment that only works with the new supplier, or retraining employees, or just the hassle and risk of changing processes. The higher these costs, the more reluctant customers are to switch, even if a newcomer offers a better price or product. Enterprise resource planning software, ERP like SAP, is a classic example.
Oh yeah, getting that integrated is huge.
Exactly. Once a company is deeply integrated something like that, the cost and disruption of switching are immense. So making it costly for customers to leave gives incumbents a big advantage. It sort of locks customers in.
Definitely sounds powerful. Okay, number 4. Capital requirements. Does this just mean needing a lot of money to get started?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yep.
The need to invest huge amounts in facilities, R&D, marketing, maybe even covering initial losses. That can be a huge deterrent, especially if the capital is for stuff that's hard to sell off if things go wrong, like really specialized equipment.
Right.
Now, big companies might overcome this, but for many, the sheer cost is prohibitive. But it's worth noting, if the potential returns look really good and capital markets are working well, investors might provide the funding. Think about financing for new airlines buying planes.
Ah, okay. So a high price tag for entry keeps many out, but not always everyone if the prize is big enough.
Exactly.
Number 5 is interesting. Incumbency advantages independent of size. So even smaller established companies might have an edge over a bigger newcomer. How does that work?
Yeah, these are advantages incumbents has just because they were there first, basically, regardless of their scale. Things newcomers can't easily copy.
Like what?
Maybe proprietary technology protected by patents, or established access to the best raw materials, or they snagged the best locations long ago, established brand identity, customer loyalty built over years, or just accumulated experience knowing the industry inside out.
Okay.
Newcomers often have to find clever ways around these, like how discount retailers, Target and Walmart, initially opened stores outside the established shopping centers where the older department stores were strong.
Smart. Sidestepping the strength.
Right. Sometimes just being there first gives you advantages that are really hard to replicate.
Makes sense. Number 6, unequal access to distribution channels. Can just getting your product to the customer be a barrier?
Oh, absolutely. A new entrant has to figure out how to get their stuff into customers' hands. If the existing channel is wholesale, retail, or limited, or if the established players have them locked up with strong relationships or exclusive deals, it can be really tough.
Like trying to get a new cereal onto supermarket shelves.
Exactly. You're competing against all the existing brands for that limited shelf space, dealing with sliding fees, promotions. Sometimes the barrier is so high, newcomers have to bypass traditional channels entirely, like low-cost airlines avoiding travel agents and pushing direct online booking.
Right, because the agents preferred the established guys.
Often, yeah. So controlling the pathways to the customer can be a major competitive weapon.
Makes sense. If you can't reach the customer, you can't sell. And finally, number 7, restrictive government policy. How can the government itself act as a barrier?
Well, governments can directly limit entry through things like licenses, permits, restrictions on foreign investment, specific regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Think liquor stores, or historically, taxis in many cities.
Okay.
But they can also indirectly raise other barriers. Strong patent laws protect incumbents' tech. Environmental or safety rules might increase the capital needed to start up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, government can also ease entry sometimes. Subsidies for new businesses, funding basic research that anyone can use. So it cuts both ways. But the rules definitely shape who can compete.
Powerful and sometimes unpredictable. Now, Porter also mentions expected retaliation. How does just the anticipation of a fight from existing players affect the decision to enter?
Oh, potential entrants. Definitely think about that.
Yeah.
How will the established companies react? If they expect a strong, sustained counterattack, the potential profits might just not be worth the risk and the cost of that fight.
So incumbents might try to look tough.
Exactly. They might signal their commitment to defend their turf, maybe through public statements or by aggressively responding to even small entrants. Newcomers are more likely to be scared off if incumbents have a history of fighting hard, if they have lots of resources like cash reserves, if they seem likely to slash prices, or if industry growth is slow, meaning any gain for the newcomer comes directly out of an incumbent's hide.
So the fear of a fight can be a barrier in itself.
A powerful one, yeah.
Okay, understanding these barriers and the potential fight helps potential entrants decide if it's even worth trying. Let's switch focus now to the suppliers, the bargaining power of suppliers. How can the companies providing your inputs, exert power over your industry?
Well, powerful suppliers can basically capture more of the value for themselves. They can charge higher prices for materials, components, services. They can limit quality or shift costs onto the industry they supply.
And if the industry can't pass those costs on,
Then it directly squeezes their profit margins. Think about Microsoft again. If they raise the Windows license fee for PC makers, and the PC market is super competitive, the manufacturers often can't just raise their own prices to compensate.
that their profits get squeezed.
Exactly. Powerful suppliers can definitely reduce your profitability.
So what makes a supplier group powerful? What should we look for?
A supplier group tends to be powerful if it's more concentrated than the industry it sells to. That Microsoft example fits perfectly.
Yeah.
One dominant supplier, many fragmented buyers.
Okay.
Also, if the supplier group isn't heavily dependent on that specific industry for its revenue, they won't hesitate as much to push for better terms. If the industry players face high switching costs to change suppliers, maybe specialized equipment, or their factories are right next door.
Right, like we discussed with buyers.
Yeah, that strengthens the supplier's hand. Suppliers offering differentiated products like, say, patented pharmaceutical ingredients, they have more leverage too. And if there are no good substitutes for what the supplier provides, maybe specialized components with unique performance, or think about the power of a strong pilots union for an airline. That gives them huge bargaining power.
Got it.
And finally, if the supplier group can credibly threaten to integrate forward, to basically become a competitor themselves, that gives them power. Look for supplier groups that are large, essential, and hard to replace.
So if they feel they're not getting enough of the pie, they can threaten to bake it themselves. Okay, now let's flip to the other side. The bargaining power of buyers, your customers. How can they put the squeeze on industry profitability?
Powerful customers can do a few things. They can force down prices, they can demand higher quality or more service, which increases your costs,
Yeah.
and they can generally play you and your competitors against each other to get the best deal.
And all of that eats into profits.
Absolutely. They have leverage if they have strong negotiating power, especially if they're also very price sensitive. Powerful buyers can squeeze your revenues and increase your costs.
And what gives a customer group that negotiating leverage?
Well, a customer group is powerful if there are only a few buyers, or if each one buys in really large volumes compared to the size of the vendors. Think big retailers buying from smaller manufacturers.
Right.
These large volume buyers are especially influential in industries with high fixed costs, where vendors are desperate to keep the volume up.
Yeah.
Also, if the industry's products are standardized, undifferentiated,
Yeah.
buyers can easily switch and will shop around for the lowest price.
Uh-huh.
Low switching costs for buyers, again, increases their power. And just like suppliers, if buyers can credibly threaten to integrate backward, make the product themselves, that gives them leverage. Think about big soda or beer companies considering making their own cans or bottles.
Okay. So fewer, larger buyers who can easily switch or make it themselves have more power.
That's the gist, yeah.
What about price sensitivity? When are buyers really going to push hard on price?
Buyers tend to be very price sensitive if the product they're buying is a significant chunk of their own costs or budget. Think about us as consumers. Buying a car or a house, it's a big deal, so we shop hard on price.
Makes sense.
Also, if the buyer group itself is earning low profits or under pressure to cut costs, they'll push much harder on their suppliers for lower prices. Furthermore, if the quality of the buyer's own end product isn't significantly affected by the quality of the thing they're buying from you, well, then price becomes much more important than quality.
Okay.
And finally, if your product has little impact on the buyer's other costs or their overall performance, price will likely be the main focus. Contrast that with, say, specialized consulting that could save a company millions, or equipment that boosts efficiency. In those cases, buyers might be less price sensitive, more focused on value.
It's all about the value equation from their perspective. You mentioned intermediate customers earlier, like retailers.
Yeah.
How do they fit into this buyer power picture?
Right. Intermediate customers, retailers, distributors, they're buyers, so they can have power based on all the factors we just discussed. Their size, switching costs, threat of backward integration like store brands. But they also have this extra layer of influence. They often control access to the end consumer. They can influence purchasing decisions through shelf placement, promotions, their own branding.
So they have power as buyers and power over the final sale.
Exactly. Producers often try to counter that channel power. Maybe exclusive deals with distributors or marketing directly to end consumers to create demand, essentially pulling the product through the channel. DuPont's Stainmaster brand, creating that consumer pull for carpets, is a great example.
Clever. Build demand to bypass the middleman's control. All right, last force. The threat of substitute products or services. What exactly counts as a substitute here?
A substitute is anything that performs a similar function to your industry's offering, but critically does it by a different means.
Okay, different means. Examples.
Think video conferencing instead of business travel, streaming video instead of renting DVDs, plastic instead of aluminum in some uses, email instead of express mail. It's easy to overlook substitutes because they might look very different. For transportation, a bus, train, car, bike. Those could all be substitutes, depending on the need. Even just doing without or buying used can act as a substitute. The key is they meet the same underlying need in a different way.
So why is this threat of substitutes bad news for profitability?
Because substitutes put a ceiling on the prices your industry can charge. If there's a readily available alternative offering a similar or better value price and performance, customers will switch if your prices get too high.
Limits your pricing power.
Exactly. Limits your potential for high profits and can constrain growth. Even when demand for your type of product is high, strong substitutes can limit how much you benefit. Think about cheap mobile phone service capping what traditional landlines can charge. Substitutes limit your pricing power and profit potential.
What makes the threat of a substitute particularly strong? What should companies watch out for?
The threat is high if the substitute offers an attractive price-performance trade-off. The better the relative value, lower price for similar performance, the more pressure it puts on you.
Huh.
Think internet phone services versus traditional long distance.
Huge price difference, yeah.
Right. Also, if the buyer's cost of switching to the substitute is low, that increases the threat. Switching from a brand-name drug to a generic is usually super easy for the consumer.
Okay.
Companies need to be constantly watching changes in seemingly unrelated industries that could suddenly create new substitutes, like new plastics replacing steel in cars. You have to watch for cheaper or better ways of meeting customer needs, even if they come from way outside your usual competitive set.
Definitely need that broad perspective. Okay, we've thoroughly examined all 5 forces. Now, the big question. How can a company actually use this framework to gain a real strategic advantage? Porter outlines 3 key ways, right?
Exactly. 3 main ways. First, positioning the company where the forces are weakest. Second, exploiting changes in the forces as the industry evolves. And third, the most proactive, shaping the industry structure itself in your favor.
Let's start with positioning, finding that sweet spot where competitive pressures are lower. Porter uses the example of PACCAR in heavy trucks. What did they do?
Right. The heavy truck industry generally faces, well, strong buyer power from big fleets, intense price competition on pretty standard trucks, powerful suppliers like unions, even substitutes like rail freight.
Tough business.
Yeah. But PACCAR, with its Kenworth and Peterbilt brands, strategically focused on a specific segment, independent owner-operators.
Okay, the individual truckers.
Exactly. These drivers often have less buying power individually, and they're much less price-sensitive because the truck is tied to their identity, their livelihood. So PACCAR tailored everything to them, highly customizable, premium trucks, fancy sleeper cabs, focus on durability, resale value.
Oh, catering to that specific niche.
Precisely. Strong dealer relationships, aftermarket support. As a result, they commanded a premium price and have been consistently more profitable than competitors focused on the big fleets. The strategic insight is, carefully selecting your target customer can fundamentally change the forces you face.
So, by targeting that less price-sensitive niche, they weakened buyer power and price rivalry for themselves. Makes perfect sense. Okay, second approach. Exploiting changes in the forces. How do you capitalize on shifts in industry structure?
This takes deep understanding of how the forces are evolving and being quick to see and act on opportunities those shifts create. The music industry's transformation with digital distribution was a perfect example.
Right, Napster and all that.
Yeah, the internet created a powerful substitute, initially illegal file sharing. The major record labels were slow, really slow to adapt. Apple saw the shift, stepped in with iTunes, created a dominant new channel.
And change everything.
Totally changed the structure, weakened the label's power, gained massive power themselves. The key strategic insight. Be alert to changes in the competitive landscape and be ready to jump on them.
So agility and recognizing those big trends are crucial. And the third way, actively shaping industry structure. This sounds like the most ambitious one. How can a company actually influence the forces?
Shaping structure means taking proactive steps to alter the underlying forces to benefit your company. 2 main ways to do this. Either redividing profitability within the existing industry, getting a bigger slice of the current pie for yourself, or actually expanding the overall profit pool of the entire industry.
Okay, redividing profitability, what kind of actions are we talking about there?
This is about weakening the other players, basically. Taking steps to reduce supplier power, reduce buyer power, lessen rivalry, deter entrants, limit substitutes.
Example.
To neutralize suppliers, maybe standardize components so you can switch easily. To reduce buyer power, enhance services, or add unique features to increase their switching costs. To temper rivalry, differentiate your product more, focus on underserved segments. To scare off entrants, maybe raise the fixed costs of competing through big R&D or marketing spends. To limit substitutes, offer better value, better accessibility, build stronger brand loyalty.
Okay.
Cisco, the big food service distributor, is a good example. They introduced their own private label brands, which weaken the power of the big national food brands, their suppliers. And by offering lots of value-added services to restaurants, they made themselves more indispensable, reducing customer price sensitivity, weakening buyer power.
Interesting. So a leader can really mold the industry structure.
Right.
What about the other approach, expanding the overall profit pool? How does that benefit everyone, not just one company?
Expanding the pool means doing things that increase the total value created by the whole industry. So there's just more profit to go around for competitors, suppliers, buyers, everyone. Maybe initiatives to increase overall demand, improving quality across the board, reducing costs throughout the value chain, eliminating industry inefficiencies, like when soft drink companies work together to streamline bottling and distribution, lower costs, more efficiency for everyone, bigger overall profit pool. Or agreeing on industry standards for safety or quality can boost consumer confidence, maybe support higher prices for all. But, and this is crucial, the five forces still determine how that bigger pie gets divided up. The most successful companies often find ways to expand the pool that also give them a disproportionate share of the benefits.
Got it. So making the whole pie bigger can be smart, especially if you can grab a bigger slice of that bigger pie.
Exactly.
Now, Porter also touches on defining the relevant industry when you use this framework. Why is getting that definition right so critical?
Oh, defining the industry correctly. Product scope, geographic scope is absolutely fundamental. Get it wrong, and your whole analysis can be misleading. Define it too broadly. You might miss key threats or opportunities close to home. Define it too narrowly, you might ignore important substitutes or entrants from adjacent markets. The five forces themselves can actually help you define the boundaries.
Really? How?
Well, if two products face a very similar set of pressures from all five forces, they're likely in the same industry.
Yeah.
If the forces are significantly different, they're probably separate industries. Porter uses the lubricant example. Motor oil for cars versus oil for heavy trucks. Similar base product, but very different buyer power, supplier power rivalry. It's different industries.
Okay.
And geographic scope matters too. Is competition local, regional, national, global? Getting the definition right is the foundation. Define your competitive arena accurately.
So if you misidentify your competitors or market scope, your strategy could be way off base. And Porter also warns against some common pitfalls when applying the framework, right? What are the key mistakes people make?
Yeah, there are a few common traps. One, as we just said, defining the industry wrong. Another is just making lists for each force without really analyzing the strength and drivers behind them. Just a checklist isn't enough.
Right.
It's also a mistake to assume all five forces are equally important everywhere. Often, one or two forces really dominate profitability in a specific industry. Another pitfall is confusing symptoms with causes, like thinking price competition is the force rather than understanding the conditions driving it. Relying on a static snapshot in time is bad too. These forces evolve. And finally, don't just use it to label an industry good or bad. It's a dynamic tool for strategic thinking, for finding ways to create sustainable advantage. Go beyond a superficial listing. Use it for deep strategic insight.
So it's a tool for proactive strategy, not just passive observation. Wow, this has been a really insightful deep dive into Porter's five forces. To bring it all together, what's the core value for our listener in really understanding this framework?
The core value, I think, is that it gives you a powerful, systematic lens to analyze competition in pretty much any industry. It lets you move beyond just looking at the surface, to understand the fundamental, often hidden drivers of profitability and attractiveness.
Okay.
By understanding the intensity of these five forces and what's driving them, you can spot threats, uncover opportunities for differentiation, for positioning, and ultimately develop much more effective strategies for long-term success. It's about getting a deeper, more informed view of the competitive landscape.
So by really getting to grips with these five fundamental forces, you can move beyond just reacting to competitors and actually start proactively shaping your own destiny in the marketplace, understanding the basic rules of the game.
Exactly that. And it encourages you, the listener, to become a more astute, more insightful observer of the forces at play in your own industry, and others too.
So for our final thought today, we really encourage you, take an industry you know well, maybe it's your own, maybe one you're just curious about, and analyze it through this five forces lens. Ask yourself, what are the dominant forces really driving things in that industry? What are the underlying factors making them strong or weak? How are they shaping profitability right now? And maybe most importantly, what opportunities does that analysis reveal that you hadn't seen before? Think about how the forces interact, how they might change. It's a framework that keeps on giving insights. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.